I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars, and the vehicle next to me has the potential to be BYD's Toyota Prado killer. It's coming to Australia in the fourth quarter of this year, and it's going to be called the Denza B5. It's quite closely related to the BYD Shark 6, which is already making plenty of headlines and finding lots of sales success in Australia, but it has more power, more technology, and is likely going to cost a little bit more. We don't know just yet, but we're expecting it to be 70, 80, 90 grand, somewhere in there, with various different specifications. And it's going to be a rival for the Prado, as I mentioned up top, along with the Ford Everest, Isuzu MU-X, and potentially even take sales from something like the GWM Tank 500. Today, we're in China, and we're going to give you a quick preview, quick rundown of this car, including all the tech, take it for a very brief spin, and see if BYD's making the right decision by bringing this thing to Australia.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Right, so first up, let's talk about design. I know you can see this car with your eyes, but to me, it looks a little bit like a Bronco Sport. That said, I really like the proportions of it. It's chunky, it looks about right, the wheelbase is nice and long, wheels at each corner. Now, speaking of wheels, these tyres fitted to this vehicle are semi-all-terrain, and I think this is probably going to be representative of what we get in Australia. Perhaps there'll be a more hardcore version coming in the future. But let's talk about the technology under the bonnet and beneath the wheel arches as well, because unlike the Shark, this Denza B5 has twin electric motors, but the power is greater at the rear. So we should expect a car that is a little bit more rear-led to drive and therefore more capable. There's also buttons inside for locking differentials, but I can't quite get a clear answer on whether they're true locking differentials or whether it's an e-locking setup using the brakes for torque vectoring. So if I do, I'll let you know, but I think it's probably going to be the latter rather than true locking differentials. There's still some pretty good off-road tech though. Dual double wishbone suspension, front and rear, and you also get cool things like the ability to do a U-turn, a sort of compass turn in this vehicle, which is pretty cool, and really decent ground clearance, really decent approach and departure angles. So we're set up for success. Let's go take it and try it out on a couple of obstacles around here. Right, so we have an off-road course here, but it's a little bit Mickey Mouse. So we've come and found a rocky outcrop to test this car's off-road capability, which I think should be fun. Modes, we've got a lot: auto, snow, sand, mud, mountain, rock, wading, burst, sport plus, and if you look down here, come back to in a minute, it looks a bit like Shark 6, but there are a whole lot more settings that will help us out here. So because we're going up a rock, I'm going to put it in rock mode. That automatically enables the locking rear differential, and it also doesn't put it into 4 low, but I will do that now, which is a simulated 4 low, again, electric motors rather than a transfer case. So let's see how it does this little rocky crawl. I must say the screens and the cameras on this car are quite fantastic. They really let you see what's going on around you. And yeah, there we go. Creeping up there. I can feel the differentials working away. There we go. So yeah, quite a lot of ground clearance. Didn't scrape on anything there. Seems like the locking rear diff certainly works better than the Shark's locking rear diff. Well, I say locking rear diff, but that traction control system, you know, seems good from first try. I think we're onto a winner here. Here's a little test I've found for the lock diffs actually. It's a funky little offset mogul thing, so I'm gonna go and pop it in, I think, mountain mode, maybe? We've got the locked rear diff. It didn't make it up with the open diffs, and so we'll see what the sort of traction control system can do for us. You can feel it working. Keeping drive going. Yeah, didn't make it up before without it on. Turn it on, makes it up pretty easily. So I think we can call that system relatively effective in practice, at least on first sample. And now let's do a little bit of more normal sort of off-road driving in the B5, which feels pretty effortless. I've gone back from rock/mountain mode into auto, and this car does have some active suspension features. It's a hydraulic system, and I believe it's limited to the dampers, whereas the more expensive B8 that we are probably also getting in Australia, that'll be more like a Land Cruiser 300 series rival, has a more active suspension that has the ability to raise and lower itself. Now in auto, at low speeds, what am I doing, 10 k's an hour through this extremely tight off-road course, it's quite plush actually, like really quite plush, kind of up there with Prado plushness, I would say, although it's hard to tell without having them directly next to each other. The steering is really nice and light in auto, and the vision is pretty good. I find it quite easy to place this car. You've got a nice tall bonnet, and the parking sensors, they do beep, but they don't constantly beep, and they're not a high-pitched beep. It's like a nice relaxed tone, which I think is pretty cool. And then we come to the powertrain as well, which is a 1.5 litre turbo petrol 4-cylinder under the bonnet, and then the twin electric motors, as I said before, and it's more rear drive than you get in a Shark 6, which I think will pay dividends when we get it back to Australia and get to try it on some proper technical rock climbing. We'll give it to Evan and he can give this thing a real run for its money. But for now, I think off-road, the B5 is pretty impressive. Pretty quiet, pretty serene, pretty comfortable. Let's see if we can't take it on a little bit of a run on some tarmac and see how the powertrain performs and if it can live up to that 4.8 second 0 to 100k an hour claim. Pretty impressive off-road then. What about on-road, where a car like this is probably going to spend the majority of its time? And let me just recap that figure. 505 kilowatts, 700 plus Newton meters, 0 to 100 k's an hour in 4.8 seconds. Let's go sport mode. Where are we? There we go, on the little tiller. I must say, this is really handy, really good. And let's have a go. Oh. It doesn't have much initial kick, but once you're up and away, you get this swell of torque, and it doesn't have any super trick active suspension. It's also pretty heavy at 2.8 tons, but do you know what? If I'm driving around normally and not trying to do anything weird, back into normal mode, there's a bit of body roll, but it's not any worse than something like an Isuzu MU-X, and it seems like the ESC stability controls seem to be much better than the MU-X. The other advantage of this powertrain, I mentioned before, it's got a bigger electric motor on the rear axle than the front, unlike its related Shark cousin, which means that when you come out of a tight hairpin, like we're about to here, you don't get terminal understeer. You actually get a pretty good, nice, neutral steer on the way out. And that's just really nice. So yeah, I think initial impressions of the B5 seem to be pretty good. It's quiet in here, steering is pretty fast and accurate. Save final judgment till we get it on Australian roads, but yeah, not bad. Now we're done with the driving of the B5, we can get to the surprise and delight features of this cabin that perhaps I wasn't expecting to find. For a start, the build quality seems really sturdy. These big handles look like they might be flimsy, but when you grab them, nice and sturdy indeed. They feel like they could take quite a lot of weight, and they're in a very handy location to get into this car. Other things like the real stitching on the nice soft materials all around the place. This sort of navy grey blue interior is really quite attractive, and there are some very clever touches. For example, this cool bin in here isn't just air conditioned like they usually are, it's actually properly climate controlled. Using this dial you can go from -6 degrees all the way up and around to 40 degrees if you want to keep your food warm or something like that. Then you've got the cup holders, which are adjustable in height, so you can have it set up for something like a small takeaway coffee cup, but if you need to fit your taller drink bottle, you can actually just push them down, and then using this button, they retract back up. Very nice. And finally, the driver attention monitoring systems that are usually so annoying in cars like this one's got a little flap that you can pull down to close it. I don't know if that'll make it to the Australian market, and I don't know if closing that flap actually deactivates the system, but I would assume so. And I think rather than jumping through the touchscreen to turn something like that off, what a neat little solution, especially when you're off-roading, so it's not too annoying. And then we come to the tech. The touchscreen is huge. I've got a big 12.3-inch digital driver's display, which is nice and crisp and legible. And there's an equal-sized passenger touchscreen, which even includes a karaoke mode, because why not? The seats are comfortable, they're heated and ventilated, and that's all done through the touchscreen, which is nice and responsive. So I reckon if the Denza B5 can maintain all of these features by the time it gets to the Australian market, it's going to make things like the Prado and Everest look pretty old hat. It's even nice and spacious in the back, and it certainly feels airy with its light-coloured roof lining and a big panoramic sunroof. The seat is pretty laid back, so it's nice and comfortable, flat floor, good toe room, good knee room. We've got clever pockets for devices and then a standard map pocket, and these quite shapely chairs to look at in front of me. So yeah, not a bad place to be at all. The goodness continues at the back. You've got a full-size spare tyre mounted to the tailgate, and you've even got these chunky recovery points here that are genuinely made of metal and attached with two really big screws, which you might not have expected. You might have thought they were just garnishes, but they really do something. The door handle, though, is a bit more of a garnish because you don't actually pull it to open the boot. You press this little button there, and then you swing it open. As you can see, it's a swing open gate. It's a little bit heavy to close on a slope, and like any body on frame SUV, you do have a bit of a compromise here with quite a high floor, and this bumper does protrude a little bit, but on the whole, I think it's a fair bit better than the current Toyota Prado with its terrible solution. Of course, you can see it's a 5-seater, AC outlet, and all that good stuff. So what do we think of the Denza B5? I think it's a pretty intriguing vehicle. Certainly seems to be a little bit more complete than GWM Tank 500, and if Denza can get the price right, then I reckon the Prado may have a real new competitor on its hands. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Make sure you hit subscribe to the Chasing Cars YouTube channel, and as always, thank you very much for watching.